Both the Prince of Neuchâtel and the Duke of Friuli repeated to me that I am about to recount as proof that the emperor, who was detained at Moscow by his hopes of concluding a peace, had no illusions as to his position, although he tried to impose them upon many other people, especially myself. He admitted from the very outset to those persons whom he honored with his more intimate confidence that Moscow was a bad situation and that he could not remain there only long enough to reorganize. That the Austrians and Prussians, the allies entrusted with the defense of our rear, would become our most dangerous enemies if we met with the slightest reverse. However clear-sighted he may have been on this point, his enthusiasm was such, and so eager was he to nurture the illusions and hopes raised in his own mind, that he cherished the hope of receiving a reply from the Tsar, or at least negotiations for an armistice with Kutuzov, which should lead to further results. It might almost be said that he was carried away by the very difficulty of his situation and blinded to his perils, so that every development combined to close his eyes and push him further into the path of danger. The Prince of Neuchâtel had received, together with a dispatch from the Prince of Schwarzenberg, a letter which gave him food for thought no less serious than it did to Duroc, and myself, to whom he showed it. Prince Schwarzenberg's loyalty and honorable sentiments lent especial value to this letter. Here is the tenor of it. The position is already embarrassing. The situation may become graver anyhow, whatever happens. I assure you, Berthier, of my personal regard and of the value I place and shall always place on my relations with you. Discussing this letter with Berthier, the emperor said, "This gives warning of defection at the first opportunity. It may even have started already. The Austrians and Prussians are enemies behind our backs. The die is cast." He paused, thought a moment, and added, "Du destin qui fait tout, telle est la loi suprême." Destiny is everything. That is the supreme law. Berthier urged the instant necessity of pursuing his original plan as soon as possible, which was to leave Moscow and move backward towards Poland, as this would circumvent all their malice and double the strength of our forces. "You are anxious to go to Grosbois and see Madame Visconti," was the emperor's reply to him. Seeing that he had hurt him, the emperor added, "This letter is sentimental nonsense. Schwarzenberg is making up to you because he prefers shooting your pheasants at Grosbois or his own at Bohemia to being worried every morning by Tormazov. Marais, however, is very pleased with him. He knows all that is going on. All is well at Vienna, and even the Prussians are fighting perfectly. If there were anything to all this, Marais has every means of information at hand and would know about it. He is satisfied. He tells me all is well, and we will wait at Moscow for Alexander's reply, for he is much more embarrassed than I am. With his Senate and Kutuzov, they have forced upon him." Chapter 8, No Truce. While headquarters were dreaming dreams of negotiations and peace, the Cossacks were harrying our foragers daily and seizing prisoners almost at the very gates of the city. They also appeared between Moaisk and Moscow. A few isolated men were chased and captured. One courier was delayed 15 hours, and this worried the emperor extremely. Every quarter of an hour, he sent to ask me, and the chief of staff too, whether we had learned anything of the cause of this delay. I profited by the occasion to renew the demand I had been making ever since our arrival for an escort for the courier, even if only a couple of men. But to establish this at all the relays would have entailed a considerable detachment of troops, and the cavalry was already greatly reduced in strength. So the emperor thought to dismiss the matter by saying it was an unnecessary precaution, that the road was perfectly safe. 3 days later, the postilion driving the courier to Paris was shot at beyond Moyaisk and was chased for 5 miles. Thereupon the emperor lost no time in sending out the detachments I had asked for. As I have said, the slightest delay in his communications with Paris irritated and disquieted the emperor, though the enemy could have obtained no real advantage by seizing the dispatches, as all important papers were in cipher. But it was disagreeable to him to see his communications with France threatened, nor did he wish the news to be known there or in Europe that the enemy was at our backs. The emperor became very preoccupied and undoubtedly began to consider inwardly the inconveniences of the situation which he had hitherto sought to conceal. Neither his losses in battle nor the state of his cavalry had perturbed him so much as the appearance of a few Cossacks on our rear. During his conversations, while he took his walk, or at the reception after dinner, where his marshals and generals were invited along with the principal personages of the household, the emperor always talked of the fine weather, of how the winter could be spent in Moscow. The emperor, likewise, openly announced his intention of marching against Kutuzov to drive him further away and thus give the army some repose. He talked of the news he had received from the Duke of Bassano, of the considerable levies that were made in Poland, and the expected arrival of 6,000 Cossacks from that country. It was at this time that the emperor instituted means for the evacuation of generals and wounded officers unable to rejoin their units at once. To these were added men of the rank and file who had lost limbs, as well as cadres of non-commissioned officers taken from all the regiments, who were to organize a new corps that were being trained in France. Everyone was required to supply horses and carriages, the emperor himself setting an example. The ambulance administration no longer existed save on paper. Lieutenant General Nonsuti, himself wounded, was placed in command of this convoy, October 10th, which crossed the Niemen before the extreme cold Senate, and luckily reached France in safety. In preparation for this evacuation, the emperor required from the Intendant General Dumas a report as to the time it would take to reach the Niemen, and was much upset at the estimated number of days, 50, because he did not like to think he was so far from his part of departure, or because he thought that others, making the same calculation for themselves, would be discouraged. He questioned the accuracy of the calculation and grew very angry, as if Count Dumas could have shortened the distance.